one-on-one with Antoine Bouchard. How you doing, Antoine?
Pretty good. Thank you. You?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to this interview here. Now, of course, you competed. First and foremost, congratulations on placing fifth at the World Masters in Doha, Qatar. You competed in the under 73 kilo division. Please let us know, what does it mean for judo competitors to be competing at the World Masters?
Well, of course, it's an awesome feeling, right? Because you got to keep in mind, Masters is only accessible for people in the top 36. So it's only the top players in the world that are allowed to compete there. So first, to be recognized as one of those top players, to be able to fight all of the elite of our sports in our category, it's truly an awesome feeling. And yeah, to be recognized as one of the best in the world is, yeah, it's truly something special.
What was the mood like in Doha, Qatar? What were the fans like? Obviously, there weren't many fans because of COVID-19, but what was the energy like?
Well, it's a very weird feeling when you compare it to the regular schedule we used to do before COVID happened, because we would go there and I'm thinking about places like Paris, Budapest tournament, Japan, of course, is also another one, like really big crowds, a lot of cheering and all. And then you arrive there and, there's all this uncertainty about the virus, like all those like extra measures that are taken. We're like, for example, we're stuck in a hotel. We're not allowed to really interact with other people. And like, we're encouraged to very like minimize contacts. So this is something weird. And especially when you arrive in an arena, like it's almost empty. Like it's very weird, very special. Truly a unique experience. Let's put it that way.
And like, it's funny because from the spectator's point of view, when you're watching this, in a way, it's really cool because you can hear everything that the coaches are saying, and you could even hear the competitors breathing. So, I mean, from a viewer's perspective, it's quite unique, I think, because you can hear so much more than you would usually. Usually, the crowds are very engaged and are very loud, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about your coach, because there was a few moments where he got really excited with some of your throws. But
Yeah.
what did you think overall in regards to your performance at the Worlds? How do you feel about that? You're placing fifth.
Well, well, of course, I cannot say it was a bad result. Actually, it's a really good result for me and for people in general to place very high at a tournament where only the top players in the world are allowed to compete. So very good result for me, and especially after COVID, after the long pause we had, like not a lot of training in the last year, and also was coming back from surgery like before COVID happened. So let's say I didn't have like a lot of opportunities to train a lot internationally and even like in Canada or at INS in the last couple of months. So first it was Pan Am, which I did pretty well also, but to be able to compete and like with the top athletes in the world was really a really good feeling and a good performance, I would say.
For sure. And before we get into the breakdown of the matches, what was your state of mind going into the competition? Were you feeling, fired up? Were you confident? Where were you at psychologically?
Well, of course, like I'm gonna say there was a lot of confidence because the tournament I competed before, as I just said, was a Pan Am Championship where I placed first. Of course, it wasn't the same level, right? The top guy was ranked about 30th in the world, and some of the top guys in my category, but were missing. But it was still a big performance for me, so I had this little confidence getting into the tournament, and I was also eager in a way to be able to face the top of my category to see how I would compete after such a long break, such a long like period of uncertainty, I should say. So yeah, like I would say there was a little bit of excitement, confidence, but also like getting into unknown territory.
That sounds very exciting and positive. I would imagine, especially if you're going up against such high level competition. Now let's dive into the first match. I believe was against the Ukrainian Kumula. I hope I'm not mispronouncing this individual's name.
I think it's good.
I think okay. So just tell us about this match. Lead us through it with as many details as possible.
Okay, so getting into the match, I knew Kamula was fortunately for me, one of the lowest ranked players available in this tournament. So in a way, it was a good draw, I could say. But of course, when you arrive at this tournament, there's not really an easy fight to begin with, right? Because it's all like more or less top 30 in the world. But if I had to pick a guy, that was like a good first match for me. And I never really fought him in training or in tournament, but I watched a couple of his matches and I thought, okay, that's like an accessible match for me. I need to be mindful about not letting myself like trap into his game, right? Because I saw he was like kind of like strong, like physical guy, like a little bit stronger than me.
Yeah, he tried to lift you at one. I think
yes.
You were nagging. Well, anyway, sorry, continue. It was an exciting moment.
Yes. So, but I also knew he was a pretty good judo player. Like he has good technique. So really my goal was to not let myself like trapped in his game, which I succeeded. I struggled a little bit throughout the fight on the physical level. I couldn't impose my style, but I didn't let myself like he wasn't imposing in style either. So, well, there's a couple of sequences, nothing really happened. The fight was pretty short, and then at some point, as soon as I stepped overhand, which is my more comfortable grip, he lifted me, and there was probably a throw that went around like the internet a little bit because it was really weird. I countered him in a way that I just literally sat on him for Ippon, which was really weird, but pretty cool to see.
It was very cool, man. It almost looked like, had you gone a bit lower, it almost looked like a Kani Basami in a way, right? but it wasn't. But it was clever the way you wrapped both your feet essentially around the back of his legs, and it was a spectacular way, I think, to start the tournament for you. And even your coach, of course, erupted when he said up for that one. Go ahead.
Well, it's a situation where a lot of players don't feel super comfortable when they are like lifted in the air, but with the years, with the experience, with my fighting style, it's a situation that I'm pretty comfortable with. I would say rarely get thrown in that specific situation. So sometimes I can catch people off guard actually and counter. That happens to me a lot in tournaments. So pretty good way to start the day, as you said. That's how I won.
Yeah, it's funny. I always appreciated, I appreciate the creativity in the way you fight. And I think I mentioned that to you in the past. How would you describe your style of judo for people who are not familiar with Bouchard judo?
Honestly, in one word, it would be weird, of course. If you were asking pretty much everyone on my team or even people that watch me, it would be weird. I think I would.
Why weird? Sorry, time out. Why weird? Well, weird has okay, you're describing it as weird. I respect that because that's your description of it. But weird has a weird sort of connotation to it. Wouldn't creative be more of a positive way of describing it?
I would say efficient.
Okay.
I instead of just getting my two hands on like lapel, sleeve, and move, I like really to go hug, to pull the guy near me, and I honestly try to put all the efforts, all of my energy, all my efforts into breaking the opponent, and I'm not the most spectacular judo player, that's for sure. I don't do big throws like other people on my team, for example. But I feel like my throws, when I do them, are efficient, and it's mostly because my opponents are going to do mistakes because they are going to feel comfortable doing techniques while it's actually where I wanted them to be.
Very interesting. Now, leading into your next match after the Ukrainian, you fought Macias. Have you competed against him before?
Never in tournament. All of those guys beside my semifinal, which I think will come later, I never fought them in tournament. Macias, I fought him in a couple of times in training camps though, and he's a very like it was a hard matchup for me in a way because I feel he's more passive. He's really good to counter, especially when you're going for big throws. He's really good to counter, good ashiwaza, so foot sweep, and he's good on the ground also. So to me, it was a hard matchup. Fighting him in training, I could never really figure out what to do against him. So I remember I just talked to Nicolas Gill, my coach, during the day, and I was like, okay, honestly, like what I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna let him stick his two hands on me. If I go in this territory, like I know the pace is gonna slow down, and that's where he's really good at. Like he's gonna want this. So my goal is just gonna be to have my two hands, or even just one hand, and move a lot, make him uncomfortable, and try to take advantage of it. So really, that was just my mindset. First sequence, that's exactly what happened. I managed to go for a sumigeshi, so a sacrifice technique, couldn't throw, but still, like I imposed myself, and it was a pretty good attempt. Second sequence, I also go for the exact same technique, except when he's trying to dodge in the air, I managed to reposition myself and throw him for Wazeri, which really good. Like after two sequence, I'm winning. I'm like, okay, that's good. Like I wasn't expecting it to go that well. Like coming into the fight. Then third sequence was a little bit slower, maybe because I just threw, maybe because I was like, okay, like I need to not get ahead of myself. Like let's keep it simple. So nothing really happened. And on the fourth sequence, I do a mistake. I end up on my knees, and he starts working on the ground. And I guess because, he was in a very good position, I just literally countered him and went back on top and held him for the second Wazeri with a Saikomi for Ippon.
Right. And I mean, even as far as your Sumigaeshi, at one point, it almost transitioned into a Tomoe-nage, right? In a way, would you say?
Yeah. Like because the way I did it on this exact sequence, because Sumigaeshi, Tomoe-nage, really similar technique. One of them is just the foot is coming in between the legs versus the other one is really literally pushing in the belly. Right. So I prefer to do Sumigaeshi for whatever reason. That's how I learned it. But then when people are on their head and kind of like, standing, I tend to like come back with the second leg and like push in the belly to try to throw on the back, like, because it brings a lot of power on this move. And that's exactly what happened on this sequence.
And your coach again erupted on that one. If you go back in the video, you'll hear.
Yes. I rewatched that fight, and I saw him like literally jump because like I guess it was going like this throw. He was in the air, but he wasn't expecting for it to work, and then like almost like a pretty good Wazeri, like when you look at it, and he was probably as surprised as me to see, oh, it's sequence number 2, and it's like a Wazeri. So that's good.
For sure. And I mean, even at one point, to go back to, you're talking about Macias has a lot of good ashiwaza. And I think at one point, he tries to go for a foot sweep, and you almost do like a quarter or a half cartwheel.
Yes.
Out of that, like I don't know if you remember Sakuraba from Pride FC, the old MMA days. Sakuraba used to do those sort of cartwheels.
Okay. I don't know
it. And I was like, this guy's friggin' creative, man. I was like, lead us through that, because he was going for foot sweep, and I think he
yeah. So he was like he had only, I think, one hand on me, and it was on my sleeve, I think. Right. And he was just lifting my head, and that's a technique actually that one of my coach, Sasha Meminovic, does to me often, except he does it with two hands, which is way more controlled, way more dangerous. So as soon as he lifted my leg like this, and he was like just jumping, I knew that this was coming, and when he went for it, I just anticipated it, and I spin out of it and tried to come back for like further actions.
For sure, and it looked great for it looked exciting for that moment. I was like, I'm like, oh man, this looks like Sakuraba back in Pride FC for all the MMA fans who are familiar and know what I'm talking about. Now, leading into the Niwaza action, it looked like Macias was going for Udegarami, I think, at one point. And you seemed like extremely comfortable throughout that exchange. What was, and I think you mentioned it, before, but what was going through your mind at that point? Because you seem almost indifferent to his Niwaza.
Well, in this position, like if I hold a leg and my arm is out, there's only one person that can literally get me all the time on Udegarami, and it's my teammate Antoine Valois-Fortier. He can always get me. The others, it's like it's a situation that I I am in a lot of the times when I do Newaza, and it's rare that I get caught because I know how to position my body, and like my fighting style is weird standing, but it's also a little bit different on the ground. Like I twist my body in weird ways, in efficient ways, and I try to be as efficient as possible. And that's actually how I got Macias. Like I was waiting for the exact opportunity, and I just literally circled his leg with my with one of the leg I was holding him, and and I just twisted it over him. So you can see that it looks like it's not much that's happening, and that's exactly what it is, right? Because I'm just like taking advantage of a good position, and I put pressure to turn him.
Right on. So now you obviously you win that match, and leaving the mats there, what goes through your mind having two wins back to back? How are you feeling at this point?
Well, I'm going to be honest. When I'm in a tournament day, beside when there's a big break, like a big break such as between semifinal and a final or a bronze match in this case, I really don't think about what happened. I don't think about what I did good. I don't think about what I did wrong. I really try to focus as much as possible on what is coming. And I knew that because I saw my the match right before me. I knew that I was going to fight the Moldova guy, Sturpu. Really good player, really dangerous, really explosive, and he loves to he has a very physical judo. So I knew it was going to be a tough one, especially since the month prior, I think he won European Championship both in junior and senior, I think. So. And I saw him fight in a couple of tournaments. He's really young, but he's really good, really talented, and above all, dangerous. So I knew it was going to be a tough matchup, and that's really what I was trying to focus on.
Very interesting, because from the get-go, this Moldovan competitor, Sturpu, seems very confident, very, like, as you mentioned, he's very strong, but you could see that he's just, the way he moves, I'm just saying, he's very assured in his ability, and he looks very physically strong. I think at one point he tries to lift you immediately, right? You're trying to go for Uranagi. Now, lead us through that match. How did you manage to beat him?
So I remember talking also to Nico before the match, and I was like, honestly, Nico, this is exactly how this match is going to play out. I'm going to need to survive for the first minute and a half, 2 minutes. Like he's going to be very explosive, and he's going to try to counter me, lift me, Uranage, Utsurigoshi, all of those techniques. And I told Nico, I was like, I'm going to let myself ragdoll a little bit, because that takes a lot of energy just to lift and try to throw. And as I said earlier, I'm pretty comfortable in those. And we have actually another Moldova guy training with us, Constantin Gabun. And it's a situation where we end up 90% of the time in fighting. I'm going to be overhand left, and he's going to be hugging me, trying to lift me and counter me. So especially leading up to the tournament where we were fighting pretty much every day, it's a situation that I faced a lot. So I told myself, okay, maybe it's a risk, but it's a good risk to take, to try to make him tired, because if I try to throw him, he's going to want to counter me right away. So I'll be patient. I'll let him be tired, and then I'll try to go for big scores. So that's really what happened. I got really surprised on the first sequence. I knew he was strong and explosive, but he surprised me also on that first grip about how strong he was, how quick he felt for 73. Right. And I was like, okay. So for the first couple of sequences, that's exactly what happens, right? I go overhand, and every time he tries to lift me, tries to counter me, and every time, I manage to fall on the knees or, hold myself in the air and fall back on the ground. So yeah, it's not like I don't look good in those situations, that's for sure. But the key in this was to make him tired, which I achieved. So after a minute and a half, I could really see and feel that he was like getting exhausted from just lifting and trying to throw me. And I took advantage of it as soon as I said, okay, now's my chance. So he went to try to throw me. And as he was backing up, I just countered him with an Oichi for Ippon.
And it was a spectacular finish there. And obviously, your coach was excited yet again. And speak to us about the communication, before and after matches. What usually happens with fighters and with competitors and their coaches? Is it usually a friendly exchange? Is it like a collaboration of strategies, or is it more of like you do this or you're going to lose? Well, what happens? Break it down.
Well, I think it really depends of the athlete, right?
Sorry, and a follow up to that is, what's your preferred style of coaching when you're getting coached?
Well, yeah. So for what happens in between the matches, I think like the preference of each athlete is going to be different. I like really to talk about it with my coach and say, okay, like, what do you like? You watch the match he just did with this guy, which fights, he's a lefty also. Like, what do you think? And it's really like a collaboration of coming up with key points, strategies. And, I like to say also, if I go in this situation, it's going to be dangerous. Therefore, I'll avoid it at any cost. And, it's really just brainstorming about what to do, what not to do. And after that, once this is talked about, usually my coach kind of like leaves me alone and I have time to refocus, relax a little bit, get my energy back and all. And when the match is approaching, I really try to mess around a little bit with my coach, talk, relax. Because when I'm stressed, I tend to talk more. I tend to really say stupid stuff if we want to. Like, it's like I like to mess around.
What do you say?
Oh, I talk about the match before, and it's like, a 2-minute goal, and it's kind of like, can one of them let themselves throw, for example? Like, it's so long. Like, I want to fight now. Come on,
right?
Just stuff like this to mess around, to try to release the pressure. And yeah. And as for my favorite type of coaching in the chair, I feel like when you're in a fight, in a way, beside if it's like a major key point of a fight, like a big mistake you're doing, I think the input from the coaches are not necessarily like important. I like to feel like my coach is really invested in the fight, really, like, when he's screaming, when you can see pump, like he's like all riled up, all like invested in the match. That's really what I like, and that's really what I'm looking for in a coach.
That's awesome, man. And it's one of those cool things. I think you tend to see a lot of coaches very invested, and obviously your coach was for this tournament was extremely invested. A lot of them are ex-competitors, of course, high level competitors, Olympians, as Nicolas Gill obviously is. But it's funny because one of the cool things is it's an international sport, and you have coaches and competitors from all over the world, from every continent, every language, every culture, and you tend to see different sort of mannerisms, in terms of like the styles of the coaches, even off to the side, the way they react. And it's a global sport, and it's a global culture, and it's fascinating to see that as a fight fan. When you see that, it's I find it cool. But leading into the sort of conversation you would be having before your next opponent, which is Hashimoto from Japan, what sort of conversation and collaboration were you and your coach having in preparation for this?
Well, it's a guy that I fought twice already in tournaments. I never really fought him in training, so never got to experience a lot. But I fought him twice. The first time was in Paris, I think 2018 or 2019. I managed to score him quite quickly. After like 10 seconds, I was winning with Zeri. But sadly, I gassed out halfway through the match, and he threw me for Ippon. And the second match was at Montreal Grand Prix in 2019, where it was not going bad. It wasn't going well, I would say, but it wasn't going poorly at all. But then at some point, managed to throw me, held me for a psycho me. So I lost to him twice already. I know what to expect, but I think the major point in this matchup was that he was getting to know me more and more because of those two matches. Like the first time, I think I had the element of surprise before fighting him. Second time, you could see that he adapted a little bit. So for that third match, we went a little bit different. Instead of always going for like the cross gripping, which is one element I really like to do, dragging them, like I said, really try to start on a completely different like angle. I tried to start with the hand to bait him to do other things, and to really try to keep him close to me for him to avoid like his big techniques, because he's a big thrower. But sadly, I really didn't manage to keep him close for me. Like throughout the match, like you can probably see me struggle, like getting a good grip in the back and like to keep the pressure on. Rich was really once he threw me, I think I kind of knew that it was going to be hard to come back. He threw me, I think, after 2 or 3 minutes. But, knowing that I couldn't get a good, comfortable grip, or barely any comfortable grip throughout the match before the throw, I knew that once he threw me, I was like, okay, that's going to be tough. I know they're not going to give Shido even if I look like amazing. So, I think my strategy of dragging him was costing me a lot of energy on top of that. So once we arrived in the last 30 seconds and even like the last minute, like I was getting like a little bit tired. And sadly, I think that's the whole story. Like I couldn't impose myself the way I wanted to. And once I got thrown, it was too hard for me to come back.
Now, if you could go back to, and there's a possibility, obviously you'd be fighting him again down the road, but if you were to go back, what considerations would you have in this match? How would you alter your approach, if you would alter it?
I think it's going to sound a little bit silly, but I think I would take in consideration that his judo-gi was really tight on his back, so really hard to get a grip. I think, there's a specific place, like we call it the pocket, which is between the thick part and the soft part of the skirt of the gi. That's where I was aiming. Like it's a little bit over the belt, but I was really trying to get that part, and his judo-gi was like so tight on him and like so fit that even that specific part, which is usually like a good part of the judo-gi to get, I couldn't get it. So I think my approach would be to really aim for the belt, like right from the get-go. Because I know Nico was telling me throughout the match, like try to go for the belt, it's a safe spot, but I think I was getting too exhausted to really go the extra mile and try to get that belt to like drag him to me.
Right. And obviously Hashimoto, I think you ended up winning silver at the tournament here. But moving on now to your next opponent for the bronze medal match, of course, Uzbekistan's Turayev. Have you fought him before?
I fought him like once in training camp, maybe in 2016. So it was still like a 66 kilo, and he was just an upcoming guy. So really not a lot of material to work with on this one.
He's obviously a very strong competitor out of Uzbekistan. And what was the mood going into this match for you, knowing that it was for the bronze at the World Masters? What was happening?
Well, of course, you try to distance yourself a little bit from the result, because there's one more match to do. There's one more. Yeah, you got to go win that match. Or you try to not say, oh, like I'm in bronze. Well, that's good. Like you try to really focus on the match itself and not on the consequences. Like, for example, oh, I'm going to do that much points. So like I'm going to be coming up in the world ranking or stuff like that. You really focus on the match itself and the outcome. Like I'm going to do third or fifth. That's it. So I think generally it was a good vibe, a good feeling. Because I was going to face the winner of the repechage, which was Kosovo and Uzbekistan. I think I got the best outcome in a way out of the two. Of course, it's two really high seeded players, like really high world ranking. I was feeling that the Uzbekistan guy was a little bit more accessible with his style, because Kosovo is really physical, really strong, which is always a little bit tougher for me. Well, Uzbekistan is more explosive, but more accessible with the kumikata, so on the gripping part.
Yeah, and it was I found it to be, a very dynamic match, a lot of power, a lot of back and forth sort of action. Lead us through the match.
So my strategy, like talking with Nico again, was like really to try again to drag the Uzbekistan guy to me. Really try to not leave him any inch to do his big attacks, because I know he's really explosive on both sides for Tsunages. He's really explosive for, like, I know he has a good Taotoshi, and he's also good on the back and for countering. So he's really explosive, dangerous on multiple angles. So I think leaving a little bit too much room for breathing would have been a bad thing. And also was to avoid the one sleeve grip like this, because we knew he had a good attack on this angle. Well, I'm not especially comfortable with this specific grip. So it was really, try to impose my tempo, the rhythm, to try to create opportunities. And we knew also that he was going to gas out like before me, like watching his other matches. So, we were comfortable that it was an achievable, like a doable win. And you can see it throughout the match, as you said, like it was really tight match. And I would say, like, if we're talking about specifics, that 95% of the match, probably, I didn't feel in danger. Like, without saying I was dominating, without saying I was like winning, I felt comfortable throughout the match. I was imposing like a good, like my grip. I was like, it was a pretty tight match, but I was not feeling in danger. And, like, I think there was good opportunities for him to throw me like on counters, on Oichis, and like on Tsunages. And I was getting more and more like, trying to climb on him, trying to break him. And my goal also was to work on the Newaza. And I think halfway through the match or so, I got a really good opportunity, actually. Managed to go for Sankaku, which is my big technique Newaza. And for 30 seconds, I was working on him. I was trying to like put him on his back for the hold down. And, when I like, there's a certain position where I lock my leg around his arm, which is really good. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get him for sure. But he managed to hold his arm, couldn't stretch him, couldn't like turn him either. So that was a big missed opportunity. And I think it was the sequence right after, actually, he did a technique that I was not expecting, that, I didn't prepare for it, especially either. Perfectly timed a low counter, and he threw me for Wazari. And sadly, once this was done, like, going like really hard on him, he was doing like, I wouldn't say the bare minimum, but he was always looking good in trying to throw me and like putting the pressure out, like off him. And he didn't get as a second Shido, which would have been really good for me to put more pressure on him. And sadly, I couldn't get back in the fight.
Break down that throw that he did on you. Like, explain it to us. Go into color commentating mode and break it down. Because please.
So I think if I remember well, I was like in my comfortable grip, which is high left hand with a right hand either on the sleeve or the lapel, like, and I was really far from him, and I was trying to drag him. I think I went for Oichi or Uchimata with my left hand and my left leg. So, this leg went for an attack, and as it was stepping back on the mat, he really just kind of like foot sweep, kind of like blocked it, whatever. And since, I was expecting my weight to be back on this leg, like I kind of like just literally fell, and he dragged me he pushed in me for the Wazari, and he tried to do it again later in the fight and didn't work because I was expecting it a little bit more. But really, it was perfectly timed and truly unexpected for me, which is probably why it scored.
Right. I mean, it's that element of surprise for sure. And you've seen him. You mentioned that you've trained with him before, but I would imagine you've seen him compete as well, and you were able to gather some notes. Now, overall, I guess the next question is, out of all these matches, which one would you say was the most memorable for you in terms of like, you took away more information and data that you can take back to the dojo and regroup and plan ahead?
Well, I mean, I think I'm like a fan of the saying you learn more in the defeat than in the victories. So for sure it would be like one of my two defeat. And I feel my fight with the Uzbekistan is in bronze is probably the one where there are more elements to work on because more varieties in terms of sequence, more attacks. Um, and that's where, like it was a really tight fight with a top player in the world. So really that's where I can find the little elements that can make me improve that little more just to be able to beat those guys. Like if I look at my fight with Hashimoto, I feel like it was a little bit more one-sided or a little bit more on this side for sure because he was really more comfortable with the way I was fighting and like I never really put him in danger while my fight with Turaev in bronze really was really, really tight. So I think there are more to get from this fight than any others.
Now, what's next for you in terms of competitions? Where you fight next?
Short answer, no idea. Because the like of course COVID, right? It's a big element that makes it almost impossible to plan long term. So we know I think until the end of the Olympic qualification, there are like 5 Grand Slams, one World Championship, and one Pan Am. Since I already competed at Pan Am this year, I'm not gonna compete again because I cannot do any points. So it wouldn't make sense for me to compete there. For sure, Worlds in June is gonna be the big tournament because it's worth a lot of points. But then it's a matter of where are we gonna go because there's Israel is the first planned tournament mid-February, so really soon. But then it's going to be a matter of like trying to optimize the trips, because if we do this, then maybe Tashkent 2 weeks later would be a trip we could do. But then what are we doing in between, right? Because a lot of countries do not allow us to just go there and train. So we got this to figure out. Other trip option would be to do Georgia and Turkey at the end of March and beginning of April because there are 2 tournaments in a row. But then it's almost 2 months without tournaments. So what are we going to do? I think it's a really big puzzle for everyone, especially for the management team, because they got to figure this stuff out. We're the lucky guys. We're just stepping in a plane, saying yes, like we're going to going on the plane, fighting and coming back. They're the one that really need to deal with this situation and plan everything.
That's fascinating. It sounds like an extremely complicated
yes, it is.
Yeah, like a logistical puzzle with so many variables in it. It sounds tough. And I mean, you got there's a great team as far as the decision-making side. They're all professionals. They know what they're doing. But I think this is a general concern for all amateur sports across the board, right? Leading up to the Olympics, there's a lot at stake. And going back to this uncertainty that you guys, you athletes, find yourselves in, how do you keep motivated in this extremely, and it's an overused word, but an unprecedented situation that the world finds themselves in and everyone finds? How do you keep yourselves, generally you're considered highly motivated, disciplined, elite level athletes, and you are, of course, but how do you in these circumstances still keep that level of focus and drive and motivation?
Well, to me, I think there are multiple ways to look at this question. I think the first key point is I think like people training at INS right now, I think we can consider ourselves pretty lucky to be allowed to train in our regular facilities. Yes, we are in very strict, very limited, very strict and limited situation, because instead of being in a group of like 20, 30, 40 people, we're only allowed to be in groups of 4. So that's only 3 partners. And we keep those partners like for a while, right? So it's tough for sure. But we got to keep in mind also that we're all in the same situation, like the guy like that you're fighting every day, he's also just fighting you and those two other guys. So I think that's the way I try to look at it as much as possible. There's only so little like room for training because of the limited resources, limited time. So I try to make up like as much as I can from those opportunities, right? Like trying to train as hard as I can because it's only very strict, very limited time schedule. Same thing for weight training. So we want to try to make every randori, every training session count. So I think that's how I can manage to keep the motivation as high as possible.
Fair enough. And a follow up to that, in terms of big picture and forward planning, how long do you see yourself competing at the highest level of your sport?
I feel like this is a really hard question to
I
answer
know. I'm
because
sorry.
I think I'm gonna try to do the best I can to answer. Of course, as long as I enjoy it, that's for sure. As long as I'm like physically, mentally, and financially, and all of the possible like aspects, as long as I'm able to do it, I think I'm gonna want to. The day I'm not going to be able to compete internationally anymore for any reason possible, for sure, I'm going to keep doing judo because that's the sport I love and that I've been growing up with since I'm like a child. And even competing probably in provincial or national level is probably still going to be in my plans at that point. I feel like the biggest aspect for me to take in consideration besides sports is school because I'm a full-time student. I'm in master's right now in biochemistry. So I think also it depends of how long I can keep doing the two. Right now I can keep doing judo whilst like studying. I have like fortunately for me a really like a boss that really kind of like he understands my situation and really encourages me. Like he's letting me compete in tournaments, but he's also letting me come back to Canada and do those 2 weeks quarantine. So that's at least 3 weeks I'm missing per trip. It's 3 weeks of school I'm missing, so 3 weeks of work in a way. And I'm really fortunate to have like someone like him that like allows me to leave for that long and lets me train a lot. So yeah, like I think short-term answer would be as long as I'm able to do it, I'll do it.
Fascinating, man. And speak to us about, I think I may have asked you this in the past. Who's been the most influential in your development as a judo practitioner and competitor?
That's probably an even tougher question because I was fortunate enough to have like multiple.
Or a few, multiple, and then
That's better for me. For sure, like the first one that comes to my mind, like because like he coached me at the last tournament and he was the one that coached me throughout the Olympic qualification. Most of the time was Nicolas Gill. He was a really good athlete, well decorated. So that's probably one of the guy that really helped me. He understands my judo pretty well, and as much as my as weird as my judo is, he really can pinpoint what I need to work on and how to make it more efficient, even though he's not necessarily comfortable with the way I fight. Um, Also, Sergio Pessoa, current provincial training, was really the first coach. He was on the national team back in the day. He was really the first coach outside of my club to notice me, to come to me, and to try to bring me and to make me go on that other level. So when I moved to Montreal, it was the doing a lot of junior trips back in the days also. So he's really been one of the coach that have followed me from the beginning of my junior years to the senior team where I transitioned more with Nico. And of course, I cannot go without mentioning my hometown coach, Roger Tremblay. He's the one that brought me to this level, that's for sure. And even though he still doesn't understand how I fight, even though like he probably discouraged me like 1,000 times to try to correct me from those like little bad habits. I think those like he was the one that pushed me through everything and teach me every basics that I know now. And he's the one that made me who I am mostly.
Fascinating, man. And are you still in touch with your original coach? Do you still communicate?
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
a lot. Every time I go, like I compete internationally, he like we talk a little bit about it, and especially when like now, it's been a while since I haven't seen it because I don't travel to my hometown anymore because of COVID. But every time I was going there, I would try to grab breakfast with him, or go to the judo club to go on the mat with his groups of younger people, and yeah, like I really try to keep in touch as much as possible with him.
That's awesome. Now, speak to us about your most cherished moment as far as judo competition or judo in general. What's that
Um,
one moment that keeps you that you think about and it just brings you nothing but positivity and joy?
I think, of course, like the easy answer would be to talk about the Olympics. I was an underdog. Even calling myself an underdog is probably an overstatement. I was like, a guy that qualified at the end of the top 22. Like I was at the bottom of that ranking, and I managed to do a fifth place by beating two of the top three players in that tournament. So that's really the easy answer, right? Being able to perform on the biggest stage and to perform well. Actually, that's probably the most one of the best memory of my life in terms of judo. If I wanted to be uh, original a little bit and try to go for other memories, I think it would be a tie between Pan Am Championship in 2015 and Montreal Grand Prix in 2019, two tournaments that took place in Canada. And I think that's probably why it made it so special, right in front of like the home crowd. Really rare that we have the opportunity to perform in front of like family and even just people that are really cheering for you. That's really rare in our sports because Canada is not the biggest judo country. So there were two major tournaments for Olympic qualification, both for 2016 and 2020. For both of them, actually, my hometown coach was there. My dad was there for both. My family was there for the Montreal Grand Prix. So to be able to perform in front of family in like an international tournament, it's truly something special that I think I still remember to this day, like really well, and it's some of my best memories.
That's awesome. Now let's flip that question around into let's power bomb the question and flip it the other way. What's the worst memory as far as judo competition for you, or the most challenging, the one that you kind of don't want to even talk about or think about?
Well, that's an easy one also. Mexico Grand Prix in 2018. So first year of Olympic qualification, considered probably one of the easiest tournament to make a lot of points because it's less people are competing at that tournament. So I go there, I fight this Hungarian guy first round that did pretty well at one specific tournament during the summer. And after two sequences, I dislocated my shoulder. So of course I need to forfeit. I'm out for 2-3 months just to try to make the shoulder like usable again for judo.
Yeah.
And then I managed to compete for a couple of months, but surgery was necessary, so I was out like total for almost a year if you put the two segments together, just because of that specific tournament.
Wow. And overall, like when you think back in terms of this ongoing journey, you've been doing this sport now for like 2 decades, right? More or less.
Yes.
2 decades, and that's quite the commitment and the journey. And what do your non-judo friends think about your commitment to the sport? What do friends and family who are not, say, fully, like, they support you, I would imagine, of course, but to have invested so much time, energy, and passion on a very competitive sport at the highest level, what do they tell you? What? Yeah, I don't know where I'm going.
Well, well, I don't know if it's going to satisfy your question, but I think just seeing the evolution of their thoughts a little bit in a way is truly something special because you start as a child and you compete and you do pretty well, like provincial scene, right? You win provincial championship or you placed and you're like, wow, that's good, but don't think a lot out of it. Then at some point, you start competing at national tournament and then you end up winning nationals or medaling there. And you're like, wow, that's really good, but it's still like just, yes, Canada is a big thing, but like stepping back from it, if you're a judo like player, that Canadian judo scene is not necessarily the best one. So, but for them, it's a big deal, right? Because you win national, you're the best in your category at judo. And then I think just the progression of starting to medal internationally and coming closer and closer to the Olympics, like you could see all of like like I guess some of them were surprised, some of them like to see that you're performing this well and that you're actually at a level they're like, wow. And I've been knowing this guy since high school. I've been knowing this guy since he was a baby, right? I think that's really like something special and interesting. And just like the way sometimes and I recall after the Olympics, like before, right after I qualified and like after the Olympics, like some people were looking at me like that I know, or they were looking at me as a different person. But at the end of the day, you're still you. Like you don't want to, you're not better than anyone else. Yes, you commit to a sport, you do well in the sport, but it doesn't put you above other people.
Yeah, no, you're a humble guy, and I think and anyone would respect your answer there. But I mean, it's really, I think, to have made it to the Olympics alone, that itself is an outstanding achievement. That like, 0.0001% of the
Yeah.
world population will ever experience. And I mean, it's the highest of the highest of sporting events worldwide. It's bigger than WrestleMania, for goodness.
Yeah, it's like the biggest even for amateur sports. So that's like the where all the eyes are looking like from all over the world looking at for 2 weeks. So that's probably like it's the biggest achievement you can do in any amateur sport. That's for sure. And even in some professional sports, like it's a big achievement also.
Yeah, no, I think this certainly it's beyond professional sports, because it's, what I mean, it's a global community of people who are coming together,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, and it's the biggest thing. And I mean, there's a lot of literature written about it, and judo is part of that community. Now, if obviously the context we're all in is COVID-19 with these ongoing lockdowns, and how have you been able to cope with all of this? I think you've kind of answered it before, but I think I saw a video you posted on the provincial Facebook group. Yeah, you posted a video on mental health, I believe it was. Correct me if I'm wrong. In terms of, was it mental health related to the lockdowns and how you
Oh yeah. Okay, sorry, it took a little seconds. Yes. I was talking about like the whole COVID, like because it's hard for everyone, right? And especially like especially for well, of course, I'm not going to say especially for athletes, because a lot of people are going through rough times. Some people lost their job, some people like are losing incomes because of it. So I'm not going to say especially for athletes, but we are one of the like areas that are really touched, because we are not allowed to practice our sports, and for some people it's like a source of income and all. So yes, like I remember talking, to try to make, like, of course, because social distancing, all those the regular stuff for to avoid the propagation of the virus. That was part of the video, but it's also to let them know that you know they're not alone in this situation, where everyone from Judo Quebec, from Judo Canada, and all over the world, we're going through the same things. They're not alone, and to not give up about it, because we're gonna get through it together. And we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel right now with the vaccines, uh, getting like more people get vaccinated. So I think the end is coming, hopefully. So yeah, that's what the video was talking about.
Yeah, and I think it was a very good positive video. I think that sort of outreach and comms is always needed. Coming from role models like yourself, whether you know it or not, you are a role model for it's true
Yeah.
for a lot of up and coming practitioners of the sport, but I think, you know, people in general look up to high-level athletes, whether professional or amateur. Now, what's interesting too is you're obviously a grad student. You're studying biochemistry, right? And I'm gonna assume that you believe in the science.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah.
And I'm not going to get into the topic of how some people don't. I mean, everyone has their opinions for whatever reason. But I guess the next question is, so you're doing your graduate degree in biochemistry. Are you going to be writing a thesis, a master's thesis?
Yes. So it's, well, in French, it's a memoir. I don't know what's the equivalent for it in English. So, you know, I do research with because I work in a lab for like someone, a researcher, and I work in this thematic to like expand his like research also, like his own personal interests. And this is what I work on, what he wants in a way, or his area of work. And I'm going to need to write a memoir at the end of my 2 years master's.
And if I can ask, what sort of research are you supporting, like in terms of what sort of experiments are you doing?
So to go complex, I work with the simulation reaction. So it's a reaction that modifies proteins after they are synthesized. And my goal is to find a way to modulate that reaction to modify the outcoming of this reaction, like upward and also downward. So this is to summarize it. So yeah, like, and this, once it's going to be done, it's going to be maybe used to in a therapeutic way to maybe understand more some sicknesses, because this reaction is implied in a bunch of sickness. Like you think about cancer, you think about Alzheimer, Parkinson's, so neurodegenerative sickness. So yeah, like it can help us maybe understand more this specific reaction in those sicknesses. It can also help us maybe come up with solutions, so like treatments for those. So this is basically what I'm working on. I don't want to get into details necessarily because it's going to sound like, you know, another language.
But you know, it's funny. I was actually looking forward to diving into the science, and maybe down the road, if it's okay with you, I would love to do a conversation strictly on science with some judo in the mix, because there's a lot of crossover. In generally speaking, when we talk about physics and the role of judo.
Well,
but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons, like, because at first when I started the university, I started in chemistry. Two reasons mostly made me go in in biochemistry after this. The main reason was really because chemistry was applied to a little bit everything, you know, at industries and stuff like this. And I preferred the chemistry of the body. You know, I tried to understand more what's happening with your body, like with certain reactions, or, you know, like certain, like, yeah, like, if I can put it that way. So for example, like we're working with a nutritionist which is amazing, Catherine Nolot, and she comes up with a lot of things. And I remember, for example, one of them was the beet juice, which is supposed to help cardiovascular capacity and stuff like this. And I really wanted to know why, like why was it helping a lot? So I was researching a lot with her, and I actually talked about it, did a whole work at school about it, because I think it's fascinating. And they're like, just like those little like nutriments, those little ways that you can improve performance, like how they work and like what to work specifically in the body. I think it's really amazing. I think if you take this discussion out of subject, you could like, people would think I talk about steroids, for example, and stuff like this, but really, like, I think it's ways to improve human performance, or, you know, understand why certain people can perform better than others. I think it's truly a fascinating subject.
Yeah, and it totally is, and I hope that we can do a follow-up interview on that.
Oh, of course.
I have a ton of questions. Real quick, in regards to that juice, was the boost in cardiovascular due to a higher amount of iron in
I think if like either because beet juice It's mostly made of beet, of course, and they have a lot of nitrates. And nitrates was used, it was transformed in the body, and I think it was helping with the O2 and CO2, like, you know, the breathing part. I think it was helping the oxygen in the blood, if I remember well. It was a while ago I did this, but I think it for sure it was with nitrates. The exact thing it was working on, I don't remember specifically, but it had something to do with those.
Follow-up question. So does this mean, is that what you're drinking after your matches? You're drinking some beet juice?
No, so I was drinking it a lot. I stopped because to make it quickly, beet juice was really aiming more for long-term like efforts. So, you know, for a bike ride, for a race, for example, it was truly optimal for them. And you could see with studies, their performance were much, much better when they were taking it, sometimes 10% faster. Well, for judo efforts, you know, since matches, a long match is going to take 10 minutes. I think it wasn't specifically like optimized for judo performances. And this is why I stopped. And usually after performance, or like after a match, it's either Gatorade or water.
Interesting. No beer, obviously.
No. That's after tournaments when it goes really well or really poorly.
That's awesome, man. Last question for you. What's so you're doing your master's. Do you foresee yourself getting a PhD? Do you foresee yourself going to med school? What's next for you in terms of on the academic side of Antoine Bouchard?
Also a really tough question, because I think there are multiple pathways that my scholar like that my school could take. You know, as you said, I could continue PhD, I could decide to stop masters and try to go to work either in industries and research, teaching in CEGEPs, for example, would be another options. I could try to go somewhere and specialize a little bit more in other areas. So it's really hard to answer because I feel like it's mostly going to depend on my situation at the time where I'm going to be done my master's. So, for example, if I'm still competing, then working is going to be a little bit tougher. So studying would be better. Versus, you know, if I'm just done judo, I'm just done studying, maybe working is going to be an open option. Going to depend also of opportunities. If I get offered something, or if I find an interest in in an area of work and I can actually get the chance to work on it. So I don't know.
Well, I think you've got a lot of options, my friend. And I mean, with a background in the sciences nowadays, there's a huge demand for science, for scientists in research and development, as you mentioned, and a few other streams. So the world is yours, man. You know, you're a judoka / scientist. So
well, hopefully.
Yeah, well, we'll see, man. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for this conversation one-on-one with Antoine Bouchard. And we hope to speak to you again. And all the best at your next competition. We don't know when that's going to happen, but we will be watching. Any last words? Anything else you want to share with us?
Well, of course, I want to thank you for having me. Always a pleasure talking to you. I think our last conversation was a little bit far away. I think was it last Elite Eight, so over a year ago. Yeah, so always nice to talk to you. Yeah, a year and a half ago almost. Right. Yeah, so it was far. Next time we can talk probably again wrestling, UFC. Always fun to talk to you about those. And yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I really enjoyed doing commentary with you and His Excellency, the ambassador. You know, and the big shout outs to him, of course. But we'll be in touch, and all the best to you.
Thank you.